So do you ever feel like your mind sort of pulls you in two directions? You know, one minute you're laser focused and doing what you need to do. The other minute you just feel like doing nothing. You feel like sitting in bed. You can barely get out of bed in the morning, or you feel like just going out and drinking with your friends. And as humans, we constantly feel, pulled in these two opposite directions. And throughout life, a lot of people, they go through life with these sort of blinkers on like a horse, and they never really understand how the mind fully works, and the fact that they think that, I'm self-sabotaging myself, I'm not the person I think I am, I'm lying to myself, when really, as long as you understand that there is a duality, which I'll explain further in the video exactly what that means, but there's a duality in your mind where essentially one part you want to be productive, and one part wants you to be unproductive, and that's just the way we're wired as humans, as Homo sapiens, as you want to say. And the one thing I wanted to say before getting into this video is that without darkness, there is no light, and without struggle, there is no success. So, this is something that we need to fully accept in our lives, and I'm going to show you exactly how to deal with it, and, basically tell you my personal story of how I've dealt with it my entire life, how I've gone through, self-sabotage through drugs and partying and things like that, and how I was able to turn that around into something successful, which is having a successful business at the age of 23. And understanding how this duality sort of works within your mind is something that can allow you to have so much personal and powerful growth within your business life, within your personal life, within your relationship life. And I've drawn this little figure here, and this is probably the worst drawn yin and yang symbol you'll ever see, but basically what the yin and yang symbol represents is that, there is darkness in light, and there is light in darkness, and that's essentially what our mind works. And all them thousands of years ago, when I think this is probably going to be extremely miscultured, whatever the word is for it, but I believe it was the Chinese that invented this. They were onto something very early about this, because this is something that is still very true and very present in the lives of people even today. And in my own life, what I sort of seen from a young age, and I feel lucky from the fact that from a young age I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I've always experienced this struggle of wanting to go out with my friends, wanting to go out drinking, wanting to go out partying, but then I know on the other side I need to be working on my goals, I need to be building that business, I need to be learning them skills, and I'm constantly torn between these two sides. And I feel like it will be definitely the same for you guys as well, because everyone goes through this. And it's almost like this, constant tug of war between wanting to, build a successful life and wanting to stay in the comfort of your existing life where you're still in pain. And at the end of the day, you believe that this, this comfort that you're in now, I stay comfy, I watch the Netflix, I don't learn the skill, I don't build the business, is comfort, when it's not. It's actually the most pain you could ever be in your life, because, I always think that the true definition of hell is to be sat there on your deathbed and realize that, the potential that you could have been, and look at the person you could have been. As I said, in the title of this video, I literally self-sabotaged myself for 7 years until I understood this concept. And when you're in control of this concept, you're able to make it your bitch. And you're able to absolutely crush procrastination, because you know exactly what you need to do on a daily basis. And by the end of this video, you're going to know exactly what you need to do, and you're going to be able to crush procrastination, and you're going to be able to kill this little bitch inside you that's telling you to stay comfy and not do the things that you need to do. And, what you need to understand as well, this isn't something that, is unnatural, or, it shouldn't exist. This is something that's actually very natural, and this is how we evolved as humans, because the way, in order for us to process information, we compare one thing to the other. So, for example, there is no unhealthy without healthy. There's nothing to compare it to, or there is no dark without light. So the way our mind works, and, this is, most of the time how we form beliefs about who we are, is we stack rocks in favor of who we are. So, one time, for example, in maths class, someone said, you're crap at maths, you're not very good at maths. And I get told that again, so I stack another rock on that scale, until eventually your mind switches off to the idea of becoming good at maths. So you stop trying to learn, you stop putting the work in for it, and then that actual idea becomes a physical manifestation of the reality of it. So, this is something that we see all the time, and hopefully I'm going to help you solve this today. And one thing that I'm extremely guilty of in my life, and I went to uni for a little while, and I absolutely enjoyed my uni days. I actually dropped out in my first year, and I moved to Spain. But in that time where I was in uni, I was living the lifestyles, partying, I was meeting people, I was meeting friends. I've made friends who I've made for the rest of my life. And, after all these parties, when I've been drinking and things like this, I'd come home and I'd feel so rough on myself, and so I'd beat myself up so much and feel so much guilt, because I knew this path that I was on was, different to everyone else. A lot of my friends are going to uni because they want good jobs, they want to be dentists, they want to go and be solicitors. But as an entrepreneur, you are ultimately in control of your life. You've got to be the one who's got the discipline over your brain. Whereas if you work with someone else, then they're essentially taking on the risk for you. Whereas if you're an entrepreneur, you have to take on that risk. And that's part of the job, and that's what you have to accept. So I would sit there and I'd be feeling like absolute shit. But the important thing to realize is that, even though I beat myself up so much, in retrospect now that era of my life is over, and, these big house parties that we used to have, these big 11-man, houses, with huge kitchens, with DJ decks and everything like that. Now that era's gone, I actually miss it. And, the thing is that at the time I would regret it so much. But I just need to get home, I need to get away from this, I need to be working on my goals. But you need to understand that you need to have a work-life balance because, as I said, the way that we compare, the way the mind works is a duality system. It compares it against the other things. So in order to enjoy work, you also have to have the work-life balance as well. And this doesn't mean that you should constantly be partying or you should constantly be working. You should, if anything, lean more towards working, but not to the point where you're going to overexhaust yourself and you're going to end up hating the work, because that's what makes it really difficult for entrepreneurs. And that's what made it difficult for me, was the fact that essentially, I hated the work because, I felt like it was all I had to do. But, when I was able to work hard and then take a moment, take a day off where I could then enjoy myself or maybe have a drink, something like that, or meet friends, this would reset me and I'd be able to go work and be way more productive when I got back to work. This is probably also one of the worst drawings you've ever seen. This is an attempt to draw a scale. But here you've got, light, dark, this is the scale to compare them. You've got work versus play. And this is, your mind. This is how your mind works. It compares one duality to the other duality. And when you're able to understand this, you're able to realize that, usually what you're missing is because you're focusing on too much on work, then you need a little bit more play. Or if you're playing too much, then you need more work. Because we're taught in society that, you just need to focus on one thing, go hard on that one thing, when really there's no such thing as one right or one wrong. It's usually a mixture of two things. And as I've mentioned in past videos, if you're someone who's highly scientific, and by the way, science has now become the new religion, then it usually means that you need to explore spirituality, or you need to experience, sort of more a religious experience to weigh that out, because you're too heavily on this side. However, if you're very religious and, you ignore science, then you should probably take on science more and use that to your advantage, because, we're taught these right and wrongs, and that is just totally incorrect. Everything is a mixture in life, and, we can draw from both sides to create the best life that we can possibly can. Next, I wanted to talk about the conflict of opposites. And for anyone who can't understand my terrible left-handed writing, that says conflict of opposites. And as I mentioned earlier, the way our brain works, it essentially interprets, perceptions of our environment, our childhood, our institutions, how we're brought up, what our parents tell us, and then we weigh them rocks on that scale and we say, this is who I am, this is me, this is how I was brought up, these are the morals that were instilled to me, this is what school taught me. And in the eyes of the best supercomputer in the world, which is our brain, this is all just perception, essentially. So, for example, let me do a little exercise with you now. If you think about the most awkward experience that's ever happened to you in your life, if you replay that in your mind, you shut your eyes, you replay that in your mind, you feel the same emotions that you did back then. Or maybe it's so long ago you don't, but in general you do. And that means that your brain does not know the difference between, what actually happened and its perception of what happened. So therefore, what we are living in is a magnificent illusion. And therefore that means that, reality essentially is the product of perception, and perception can be changed through what we believe, because our beliefs drive our perception in life. The reason why affirmations and, the law of attraction, which has worked for me, amazingly throughout my life, and I attribute a lot of my moderate success to law of attraction and things like that, is because that your brain does not know the difference between memory and, present, what is going on right now. And these two, internal conflicts, these two dualities, the one that drives you forward and the one that drives you back, are completely natural. This isn't something you should fight. This is just your brain, and it's its way of interpreting the environment, interpreting your sensory data into your brain and trying to make sense of it. Without this, it goes for the same for success and failure. And, without failure, we wouldn't know what success is. And without, success, we wouldn't know what failure is. So this is an essential and natural thing that's part of the human brain. And, we don't need to ignore it. We just need to understand it. I look at this in my own business. So when I was first in uni, that's when I started my first company, well, not my first company, my first successful company. And, you know, at the time, I started making some real money. And, you know, I thought I was the dog's bollocks and I was, you know, letting people use me because they knew I had money. So I felt almost embarrassed to say no to lend money to people or, you know, to spend money because they knew I had it, which is the total wrong mindset to have. And this really began to crush me because this is where, you know, things really went wrong for me, essentially. As, you know, I would build my way all the way up to the point where, you know, the business was making, you know, 10K a month in revenue. And, you know, we were probably doing like 70% margins at this point. And, you know, I thought, you know, that's it, I'm rich. And then I would, you know, go back down, right back down to here again, back to comfort. And I'd end up spending it all. And even though I was making, you know, £10,000 a month, I would not have a bean to my name because I would spend it all. And this is the same cycle we see a lot of people go through. And this is like this self-sabotaging cycle. It's because when you get to this point, you think, you know, I'm comfy, and, you know, you start spending, you know, I've got disposable income to spend, and you just end up going back to the things and you forget to do the things that actually got you successful in the first place. And, you know, I would get to this point, I would spend all this money, and then I'd come to this point and I would barely be able to get out of bed. And, you know, I would, you know, be riddled with anxiety. I'd be getting up at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And I'd be thinking, how am I going to get my next money? You know, everyone thinks I'm this person or I'm making this money. Yeah, you know, I've spent it all and I've not been to my name. If we actually map out what most people's lives look like, it looks something like this. So, and this is quite funny because if we look at like quantum physics or we look at wavelengths and things like this is, you know, quite scary in the fact that this relates to the human mind as well. So for me, it might have been my high point was, you know, I build my way up, I make 10K in 1 month off my business. And then I'm like, yeah, I'm good, I'm comfy, I'm going to spend. And then I'm like, oh shit, I've only got, you know, £200 left in the bank. So I start grinding again, I start building my way up, and then I get to my comfort level again. Say this is, you know, another £10,000 in the bank. I get comfy, and then I'm like, I can spend, I can buy more things, I can go on holidays, and then I come back down. And this is what most people do their entire life. They live on this sum average line. So if you imagine this line here is the sum average. And, you know, this doesn't have to relate to business. If you're watching this and you don't have a business, this can relate to your wage from your job. You know, essentially this might be, you know, where you've just been paid and you're like, I've got enough money to pay, I've paid my rent, I've got some disposable income. Most people go up and down and they never make any real progress. And this is, you know, I don't blame people because of this, because linear graphs that we're taught in sort of maths and things like that, where they go straight up, you know, they rarely exist in real life and they only really fit into, you know, mathematical models. And, you know, what we tend to see in life is compound growth graphs that look like this. This is a compound growth graph, essentially. So, you know, you've got nothing, 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 a little bit more, nothing, nothing, and then it shoots up like this. And this is what we tend to see in the wealth of, for example, like Warren Buffett, a lot of billionaires. And it's because of something called the compound effect. What I like to relate this to is the butterfly effect. So this is something where tiny little minuscule actions and you know actions that we take throughout the day slowly add up and compound and create a bigger effect. And I believe there's a reason that we can't understand this with our conscious minds, because whether you believe we come from monkeys or what, you know, as Homo sapiens, it would be too much information to process every single little action that we've ever took and understand where that leads to. So we kind of live in survival mode where we're thinking about like food, sex, water, shelter, love, self-esteem, self-actualization, instead of thinking about these tiny millions of micro decisions that actually lead to success. So that's why we're not really able to understand this properly. And this is why things like law of attraction work well, because it allows us to understand the concept without understanding the actual sort of minuscule details behind it. The premise of this video, I've explained the concept here, but how can we actually use this to our benefit and how to use this to be successful? And it's by understanding how to embrace these two sides of you. We acknowledge these two sides by understanding where our comfort zone is and where our panic zone is. So as I explained earlier on the graph, my comfort zone for me was 10K. You know, that's going to be unrealistic for a lot of you guys. So let's just, let's use a different number. Let's use something, most of you are going to be making. So your comfort zone may be, you've got £500 in the bank. That's your comfort zone. So if you understand that, at this point, that's when you're going to start thinking, oh, I'm okay, I can start spending. As long as you acknowledge that and think, no, I've got £500, that's to save, that's to invest. I'm not going to start spending when I hit £500. You've now acknowledged your comfort zone. Or if you got to, £100 and this is your panic zone, then you need to understand that this is your panic zone, this is low, so you're going to go, and you need to kick into gear if you get to this point. But as long as you set these boundaries for yourself, you can turn this into your greatest ambition, and you can use this to your greatest advantage. And every time you feel this dark side of you and this ambition sort of in conflict, use this to your greatest advantage and understand that, in life, there's no such thing as who you are. That is just the rocks you've stacked on one side. I am this person. Intuition taught me this. School taught me this. My parents taught me this. Bullshit. All that matters is who you're becoming, and you can manage this by managing your upside and managing your downside, and you can turn this into your greatest gift. Even though, I've sort of explained my personal experience with this, I want you to really think about how this applies to your own life. What your panic number is, what your comfort number is. Take note of them and write them on a graph, put it on a wall, write it on a piece of paper and put it on your wall so you can see it every single day, so you're aware of it and you know where your comfort and your panic zone is, and you're going to be able to do amazing with this. So, if you've got similar experiences to this, and I know a lot of you guys will, because this is what most people's experiences are, then leave them in the comments, and I'll try and get back to them, as many as I can. So I hope you found some value in this video, and if you want more videos like this, let me know, and I'll see you in the next one.